So in today's session, we'll be joined by Mr. Vaibhav Goyal from ONDC. He'll be joining in a bit. And Mr. Manoj Gupta, who's the founder and CEO of Plotch.ai, he will also be joining us shortly.
Hi, Neha. Sorry, I got a little bit delayed. Hi, good evening, everyone. So I think Neha is Neha. Yeah,
Yeah, I
am I
was
audible?
just, yes, you are audible. I'm
Okay,
audible.
okay, okay, okay.
So I was just asking that who all are already part of the network and as a buyer app, as a seller app, or in any other
Yeah,
way,
yeah.
and who are thinking of becoming part of the network. So I saw a few hands up. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
some.
Great. I think you have a good crowd here, and great to see so much of interest in RSF. RSF, I think Neha will tell you a lot more about RSF, what RSF is, and I'm assuming a lot of you, already know what RSF is. But fundamentally, RSF stands for Reconciliation Settlement Framework. It's a framework which ONDC launched about, I think, 1.5 years back. It wasn't RSF 1.0 is something that we know, where a concept of RSP was introduced, and through the RSP the payment will flow, kind of stuff, right? So the whole purpose of RSF is that because it's a network, the payment is collected by one party, and then basically the payment has to go to the another party. The payment has to flow in the network, and basically the RSF framework allows you to ensure that the payment can flow from one party to another party in the network, right? So that's basically is broadly what RSF concept is. And RSF 2.0 is an enhancement on top of RSF 1.0, and we'll hear a lot about that from Neha. So Neha, over to you. I think looks like a very interesting session, and Vaibhav is also here. Welcome Vaibhav to the webinar here. Great to have you here.
Hi, thanks. Sorry, I joined like a couple of minutes late. And I just want to thank you, for taking this initiative. I think it is really, really important, considering the fact that we are doing something so unique, which has not been done before. It can be difficult for folks to understand, what exactly are we doing. It's never been done before, so thank you for taking this as an initiative and helping the ecosystem learn.
No, thank you, Vaibhav, for coming here and supporting us in this. Definitely, that helps a lot. And definitely, it's very unique because in the Amazon kind of platform, right, the payment is collected by the party and retained by the party, and then it is settled by the party itself. Here, basically, it's a multi-party ecosystem, so payment is collected by someone. It has to be settled by to another one, and then it again has to be settled to the edge of the network where seller or the buyer is there, kind of stuff, right? So that's why it's very, very unique. And Neha, over to you. I will not take a lot of time. Yes.
Thank you so much, Manoj. I would like to share my screen to start off. Just give me a second.
And I would encourage folks to ask questions because it's very important for you to understand what RSF is, how payments work. It can be little confusing, but more you ask is more you will understand, and more we can help you and also take inputs from you if we can make things better. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you so much. Welcome once again, all of you, for today's webinar, RSF 2.0. So here the idea is plug and play, how things have been structured in a way that all the payments and reconciliations can be done on the network very quickly. We'll have almost 20 to 25 minutes of presentation. And in between, I will ask you in case you have any questions. You can either unmute yourself and ask, or you can put the question in the chat box, right? And welcome once again to you, Vaibhav. So Vaibhav is the Vice President, Network Governance on Open Network for Digital Commerce. And he has been instrumental in a lot of positive changes which are happening on the network. So we are looking forward to your valuable inputs, Vaibhav, going forward. So we'll spend a minute to just understand, how the ONDC structure is right now for anybody who is new to ONDC and is just starting off. So here the box that you see in the center, it shows you what are the parts or you can say the legs inside. So you have buyer app on one side and seller apps on the other side, right? So the buyer apps have buyers or the customers. So mostly they are for demand generation. They are the front end of the network. They do the order bookings, and whatever the customer is browsing, whatever they are purchasing, the entire supply is coming from the seller app side, right? And seller apps, for example, Magic Pin, they will have lots of sellers who are attached to them, right? So there'll be Pizza Hut, there'll be, for example, Starbucks, whatever. So there are different sellers who will be fulfilling the order. So this is broadly how the structure of ONDC is. Demand on one side by buyers and buyer app, fulfillment on the other side, which is the supply side from the seller and the seller apps. Now, for this entire ecosystem to work smoothly, ONDC has come up with two very important things. One is IGN and the other is RSP. What is IGN? Very quickly and in a non-jargon way, it is issue and grievance management. So basically, any customer who has any sort of issues, concerns about the order that he or she has placed, they can raise it through IGN, and that issue is then forwarded to the seller app through this, right? So, and it can be resolved from the seller app side. Similarly, for payments, we have RSF. Of course, this whole webinar is around RSF, so we'll get more into the details of what is it, how does it work, how it used to be, and how does it look like now, how things have been simplified, and all of that. It's going to be interesting. I'll try to keep it very simple, and I'll try not use too many jargons. And please feel free to ask any questions. I'll take 3 pauses where in between where you can ask those questions in the chat box. So yeah, so
Neha,
basically,
so sorry, I just want to go back to the previous slide, just because it's important for people to understand how the payment flows, right? So in this example, Snapdeal, for example, is a buyer app. Magic Pin is a seller app, and someone like a buyer, like me, Manoj, wants to buy a pizza, right? So I basically go to Snapdeal, search for pizza, and I see Pizza Hut, which has come from Magic Pin, right? And I see that pizza. I ordered that pizza. I pay for that pizza to Snapdeal, right? I paid 100 rupees. Now that 100 rupees is collected in a prepaid, as if today basically most of the transactions are prepaid. So Snapdeal collects that 100 rupees, and each buyer app in the network has a buyer finder fee, right? So in this example, we have assumed like 3 rupees or 3% is the buyer finder fee, right? So Snapdeal will keep the 3 rupees.
Right.
And because the seller is the Pizza Hut, right? So the payment has to get to the seller, which is the ultimate seller, which is the Pizza Hut here, right?
Right.
So basically the 100 minus 3 rupees, which is the 3 rupees, the buyer finder fee is kept by Snapdeal, and 97 rupees is paid to Magic Pin, right? And now Magic Pin might have their own, commercials with Pizza Hut. In this example, we assume like say 2% of the 100 rupees, which is 2 rupees. So 2 rupees is kept by Magic Pin, 95 rupees goes to the Pizza Hut, right? So this is basically how the payment flows in the network, and this is something that while we are looking at RSF 2.0, we will see how the 97 rupees, the 3 rupees, and the 95 rupees, which is to seller, 2 rupees to Magic Pin, and 3 rupees to Snapdeal. That three, what I would say, flow, 3-party flow, or a fork of 3, 3-party flow of payment will happen, like 2 rupees, 3 rupees, and 95 rupees. And that's very important when we're looking at RSF 2.0, that how RSF 2.0 actually makes that happen. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Manoj, for that. So to make it more relatable to a lot of sellers who are already selling on different platforms like Amazon, Jio, Myntra, and all of that, typically their timelines for payment, they vary from 7 days to 15 days. Some of them take more time also. I think with Amazon, it's like for newer seller, it's a longer timeline. For older seller, they keep reducing depending on their performance, all of that. It's pretty dynamic. So, I'm sure all the sellers who are already selling, they would know how it works. Now, at ONDC, whichever buyer apps are there, most of them, they are being encouraged to make very frequent payments. I'm sure Vaibhav can throw some more light later around that. Typically they have to also declare like what is going to be their frequency of the payments and all of that. But it's definitely much better compared to how typically the timelines are there for the payments on the other e-commerce platforms, so to say. Okay, so coming to the core, which is what is RSF, right? So in very, very simple terms, we have already discussed a bit. Also, Manoj gave an interesting example. So it is nothing but a system for making fuss-free payments. So in very casual language, an efficient way of making payments on the network from the buyer app to the seller app, right? And so how it works, we look into it in the forthcoming slides. Why it's why so much noise around it? Because it's a very transparent way of making the payments. It's a non-biased, transparent way, which is very efficient. And also, if there are any edge cases, mostly issues arise when there is disputes, discrepancy, and things like that. So if there are edge cases, it has been handled in a very nice fashion where if if scenario A happens, then it has to be handled in B way. That ways, a lot of edge cases have also been defined to make things simple and easy, non-biased. Right? So let's see, how it's going to happen. So this is how RSF.
Neha, if I may, let me actually just before you get into the whole flow piece, and I think eventually we'll also sort of cover the need for 2.0 and 1.0. I think before that, I wanted to give a point of view on why RSF is needed, because essentially, uh, see, there is the existing marketplaces also have their own way of settling payments, right?
Yeah.
And hence, what is the need for us to create a whole settlement framework, disrupt the system in some sense? I think it is very important that we are able to establish that point.
Yeah.
Uh, so when we started off this particular initiative, right, like we listened to both the sellers and the seller network participants to understand what is their pain point. Now, one of the biggest pain points that today's sellers and seller network participants come back to us and kept saying to us is their worry whether they will receive the money or not. Once essentially the money goes into any buyer application, and I don't want to name a particular entity, whether it is retail buyer application or a mobility buyer application like Uber, the money essentially lies with with say an Amazon, say a Zomato, say a Swiggy, say an Uber, and then it is up to their terms of trade to essentially give away the money. So the sellers, there is a huge anticipation and anxiety with sellers that, oh, is my money going to be safe? When will I receive my money? So the trust in the system has to be developed, and that trust has to be developed and safeguarded by an agency which in some sense is trusted by all. So that with that particular framework, we thought we should bring about a settlement framework which gives that trust and which elevates the anxiety within the sellers that your money is going to be safe. And with that thought, we said that, okay, let's actually ensure that the money is collected in a certain way by the buyer application. And the settlement essentially will happen via third-party agency, which we are slowly going to discuss, which is called as the settlement agency, which is a government entity, which is the NPCI and NBBL, which is a neutral third-party agency. Only by their instruction is where the buyer application today can can use the money and transfer the money to the seller application. So I think generating that trust in the network, and how do we generate the trust is via tripartite agreement, wherein the money flow from the bank account, or what we call as the non-operative bank account, non-operative current account of the buyer application, can only happen by this third-party trusted government entity, which has been regulated by RBI, so that the money for a seller application and seller is safe. Obviously, then there is whole RSF 2.0, which is going to come in, and we are going to discuss that. But that particular point, I think trust, generating that particular trust that your money is safe, your money is not going anywhere, it is controlled by a regulated entity. I think that is the reason. That is the primary reason actually we started off with the RSF framework.
No, very valid. I think we have a very, very, very pertinent point, and this is the thing that a lot of sellers, we have heard that they're worried about money and those kinds of. So a very interesting upgrade in RSF from that point of view. I think what I know, Vaibhav, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the seller apps and the sellers actually, of course, seller app on behalf of seller can request a payment, right? And unless there is a mismatch between what the buyer app is saying, that in this example, let's say the seller app will request 97 rupees, right? And buyer app will say that I want to pay I will pay 97 rupees, right? Unless there is a mismatch, the money will be withdrawn from the buyer app's account and will be credited to the seller app's account, right?
Yeah, absolutely right. I think that's the second change. If you see the whole movement from RSF 1.0 to RSF 2.0, one major change that we did was have a two-way recall, which initially meant, so again, I'm going to take the example of what happens today. What happens today is and like I am Amazon, I collect money. I want to give you the money. Say, Manoj, I want to give you money. I will decide what I want to give you. You will not tell me as to what are you liable on.
Yeah.
Let me only decide as to what I have to pay. What we said is that here the sellers and the seller application should have a say. So there is a two-way recall mechanism that we have essentially brought in, wherein seller application says that for this order, I expect, say, 10 rupees to be given to me.
Yeah.
And this is the split. And the buyer application says that I have to give 10 rupees. There's a matching which happens by this third-party agency, so that it is completely neutral. And then the 10 rupees essentially gets debited from the non-operative current account of the buyer application, which only NBBL or the settlement agency can instruct. And this 10 rupees gets debited and credited to the seller application's bank account. The second big change that we have done is we have enabled the ability for seller application to directly give money to the seller. So, so the second big problem, or the second big friction point that we identified was that today sellers say that, listen, boss, there are like too many hops in the system. First, the money goes from the consumer to the buyer application. Then the money goes from buyer application to the seller application. Then the money goes from seller application to the seller. So a seller today can come back and used to tell us that, my working capital gets blocked for too long. And there needs to be an innovation and, disruption in this whole settlement framework. Today also, like, for example, in Amazon or Flipkart, the life cycle of when a seller or a seller application, particularly a seller, receives money is just too long. Like a seller application might receive money, like what Neha just mentioned in one of the previous slides. It says 7 to 10 days.
Yeah.
But the end seller, even there, gets the money far later than that. So what we said is, let's actually short circuit this entire thing, because eventually a seller application is an agent of the seller. So he also needs his whatever agreed commission that he has between the seller. So let him take his commission and let the money directly go to the seller. So in RSF 2.0, what has been enabled is direct payment to the provider from the buyer application. So a seller application can simply say that I have, within the, say, 10 rupees that have been passed on, say 2 rupees is my commission, 8 rupees, please directly give it to my seller. That is enabled in RSF 2.0. So to reiterate, two big changes: two-way recon is there, when a seller application demands for the money, which gets matched with what buyer application has to pay. And second is a direct payment to the provider on record or seller on record. So I think that are the two big changes essentially, which in my view are game changers in the industry. We have already seen success stories with Namayatri, where how powerful the network can become if the money is directly going into the seller or provider or driver's hand, and how it can really fuel growth both for the provider as well as the network, because it really helps improve the working capital on the network.
Yes,
No, definitely. I think from me, basically two big takeaways. In simple ways, that seller has more control on the money, right? So basically, they control, which gives them more trust. And the second thing, the number of hops have gone down, right? So so Amazon, it's a 2-hop payment, and now even in ONDC, from consumer to the buyer app and the buyer app to seller, right? So they're 2-hop kind of stuff. So that's basically the very interesting takeaways for me, at least. Yeah, thank you,
Yeah.
Weber, for that. Yeah.
Yes. So, in fact, one of the points that Vaibhav had mentioned earlier, I would like to share an experience. For this presentation, I was just doing some research work. I was trying to find certain reports around seller satisfaction. Maybe, there's some surveys done and things like that. And what I could find was lots of reports around customer satisfaction, customer retention rates, customer journey, and things like that. So, thanks to ONDC that, they thought about sellers, because I think, there are not too many people in this ecosystem who are thinking like this. So, thanks, Weber, once again for coming up with this, and thanks to ONDC. So, yeah, moving forward, I just thought of, before we jump on to the new flow of RSF 2.0 and how it has become more robust and evolved, I thought a little bit, we should know how the history was and how things started off. So I'll try to keep it simple. It looks complex. It's not that complex though. But so collector is somebody basically who used to collect the payment from the customer. Easy to understand, right? And then payment details had to be prepared by the preparer. For example, Plotch will prepare the details if you're using the Plotch platform, and then the collector recon was supposed to be sent to the RSF, and then those details, the through settle APIs, were sent to the settlement agency, who in turn used to do the settlement. So here the settlement agency is NBBL, which we will talk about in detail also a little later as to what is their role in this whole thing, etc., why they are important. uh, so once the settlement is done by the settlement agency, the confirmation is sent in the form of on-settle APIs to the RSF back from the settlement agency, and then the receiver receives the details, right? In case there are any discrepancy, then what used to happen was through IGM they had to raise it. Right? Same goes, in case the collector had any sort of discrepancies, issues, again IGM had to be used. So it seems like a proper flow. So what was wrong? So what was it which was missing, which we will see now that why a change was required. I think we did discuss a couple of pieces a while ago. So three main challenges that were there. One was that the dependency on buyer app for the payments to initiate was too much, right? So the sellers of the seller apps used to feel extremely powerless, because they used to sit and pray that the buyer app is supposed to initiate the payment. So they were, so basically it's not fair for them, right? So that's why the whole framework was rethought about. Second point which we just discussed was that out of this whole payment flow, the payment from the seller app to the seller was not a part of RSF, right? Which again is something very important, as we were discussing that unless your sellers are happy, they will not feel encouraged and motivated to add a lot of products, to fulfill them on time, give great service, also ensure that your customers are happy and all of that. Considering all of this, in this new framework, even the seller payments are part of it. And then another thing was that a lot of manual intervention was required in the older framework that we saw. So yes, this is how it looks like. This is how the RSF 2.0 flow is right now. And it's fairly simple. Here we can see that there's collector on one side. We just discussed collector is the one who collects the payment from the customers. Receiver is the one who is supposed to receive the payment, right? So here, in this case, both of them can do the submission, right? Which is the through Settle APIs. They can they can initiate this request. And very briefly, if I tell you, a settlement agency matches both the requests coming from the collector and the receiver. Whatever matches, that payment is settled, right? And how it is settled? First of all, what settlement agency will do, they will check in the buyer apps account, which is the NOCA account as they call it, which is non-operative current account, which also we'll cover in a bit to understand what sort of an account it is. So you cannot make any ad hoc payments from that account. It's non-operative as it's self-explanatory. So the settlement agency will check what is the balance. If it's sufficient, it will make the payment which is due to the seller app in the seller apps account, to the seller if it's it has been instructed to do so. They will do it in seller's account as well, seller's bank account, and also the commission or the buyer finder fee which is due to the buyer app, that is also done in buyer app's operative account or the OCA account. So it's a simple structure which is more balanced, where the requests are coming from both the ends, and the payments, whatever is due to whichever party involved in this, is taken care by the settlement agency. I would like to take a pause here, and I would request, in case you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or you can also put it on the chat box. I'm not able to see. Are there any questions? Sachin, would you help me with that?
And Neha, one question.
Yes.
For the refunds, how will it go?
Okay, Weber, would you like to take up that question?
Yeah, so I think there are two parts to it, right? One, whenever you sign a contract, which is a transaction level contract, the buyer application, which is the collector in this particular case, essentially will very clearly communicate that the payment essentially will happen post the end. So there's a settlement window and there's a settlement basis. So while communicating that as a part of their static terms, even before the order essentially is placed, the buyer app typically basically says that the payment essentially will happen at the end of return window. So till that particular point of time, if the buyer application will not release the payment, or essentially the seller application in the RSF 2.0 framework also should not demand for the payment till the return window is essentially closed. And therefore, the refund in this particular case essentially does not arise till the time the return window is in place. So once the return window essentially gets done, the chances of a refund essentially are next to negligible. And thereafter the payment essentially moves away from the NOCA account of the buyer application to the operative current account of the seller application. Now, in extremely edge cases of a refund essentially happening, what the buyer application can also do is, and the framework enables that, is have a withholding amount as an entity, wherein they can say that I am basically withholding X particular amount. Again, that is well communicated in advance as a part of the contract between the buyer application and the seller application, that they will essentially hold XX percentage and release it after a certain particular point of time. That is point number two. Point number three, just like here, and which has been presented in a very, very good way by Neha, is she has made it agnostic of buyer application and seller application. So there is a collector and there is a receiver. Now the collector can be both buyer application and seller application. Now in refund flow, the collector becomes the seller application and the receiver becomes the buyer application. wherein the receiver can raise out a request and the buyer application agrees to it by the settle code. So the same thing essentially reverses for the refund amount in the extremely edge scenarios. However, in all the cases, what we are advising to both the buyer application and seller application is that your settlement window and settlement basis should factor in the return window period. So the payment essentially happens post the return window expiry, and hence the refund scenario essentially doesn't come into the picture before the settlement is happening between the buyer application and seller application. I'm hoping I was able to answer that question.
So, Vaibhav, just to expand that question once more, suppose the customer has put in an order and the money has been deducted from the customer and money is lying somewhere in between. But the customer now cancels the order or the seller cancels the order. How do we reckon that?
Okay. No, so that's what I'm saying. So let's take an example in which the buyer has paid for something, say paid 100 rupees, and that 100 rupees currently is lying in the non-operative current account of the buyer application. The buyer application cannot use that money till the time settlement agency instructs it to do so. Now, the buyer application can only transfer the money to the seller application post the end of the return window. If the buyer in this particular case asked for the money back, which is 100 rupees before the expiry of the return window, then that 100 rupees gets deducted from the NOCA account of the buyer application and refunds back to the buyer. Was that clear?
Yeah, so understood. So we have to open a new account to manage this.
If you're a buyer application, you have to have a non-operative current account in the bank. And there are all the major banks are already enlisted. I think Neha will also discuss that. So as a mandatory feature, and I think she's also going to discuss what it takes to be RSF 2.0 compliant. Under that, one of the mandatory thing is that if you are a collector of money, you need to have a non-operative current account.
Okay, done.
That is like I said, that is the reason why RSF 2.0 is in place, because it generates trust in the system, right? In a non-operative current account, the buyer application cannot, by its own whims and fancies, use the money. It can only do so once the settlement agency, which is NPCI, instructs it to do so.
It brings a lot of discipline in the system. There are no ad hoc movement of funds. All those things do not happen because it's all managed by the settlement agency, right?
Right.
Okay. Any other questions?
I think Ravi has a question. Ravi has raised. Ravi, you want to say?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Plotch team, and thank you, Vaibhav, for organizing this. It's very informative. So my concern is only around the matching aspect. I don't know how RSF 1.0 worked and where were the bottlenecks. I believe there is going to be an issue with the matching of the orders. Unless the matching happens immediately, then it goes into IGM and then it may take another day or two, right? I don't know what is the time frame after IGM. It goes into IGM because there are many aspects like payment fees, delivery fees and shipping fees. All these, in some cases, the logistics is managed by the seller themselves. So very early on, I think the quote trail or the quote itself that they're exchanging is very critical for matching to happen later on. Is that correct understanding of mine? And how do we make sure that everything?
I'll try and understand. So there is a recon and then there is settlement. The settlement agency, Ravi, here is for the lack of better word, is a brainless entity. They are not doing the reconciliation work. They're essentially, I am a buyer application, you're a seller application. I know I have to, after deducting everything, whatever my commission is, whatever XYZ thing is, I know I have to give you 100 rupees. And you know you have to collect 100 rupees. For this particular order, the customer gave me 110 rupees. 10 rupees is is what I as an entity have collected for myself. I have to pass on 100 rupees to you. Now, in my quote object of settlement, which I'm sending to settlement agency and which you need to also send as a seller application, I have got three fields which I will use. One is inter-entry amount, which essentially means what do I need to pay you in your non-operative current account. Here I am the buyer application, you are the seller application. So I basically say for the 110 rupees, 100 needs to be given to you. The second field is collector, which essentially means me as a collector, what was my commission. So I said 10 rupees is my commission. So 10 rupees is something that it is to be earmarked for me. And self essentially is what goes from my non-operative current account to my operative current account, which again is 10. Now, you as a seller application, what will you send? Now, you know, I need to get 100 rupees for this 110 rupee order. So, you will again write 100. In self, essentially, is if you are basically going to collect this self in your operative current account, which is the case, again, you will write 100. And collector, you know that BFF or the buyer funder fee or what is taken by the buyer application is 10, so you will write 10. So these are the three fields, and in easy parlance, the inter-entry amount, which is 100 rupees, is what gets matched between the two entities, and 100 rupees is what gets in. Now, hypothetically speaking, you guys don't agree in this 100 amount. You say I want to get 105. The buyer application says you need to get 100. There are two new APIs, which is Recon API and On-Recon API, which are essentially used for reconciliation between the two parties. Now, you will, as a seller application in Recon API, you will tell me with all the details. There we have all the details like withholding amount, TDS, TCS, order amount. So there are all of those particular fields where you will tell me how did you arrive at 105 rupees. And I will basically either accept or disagree. And if I'm disagree, then I will tell you, what is my calculation for 100. So this particular loop essentially can go on till the time both of us agree. If both of us disagree and we want to take it to IGM, we are free to do so. So, but from a settlement perspective, what is getting sent across is what is the value that needs to be exchanged between the two parties and not the calculation of it. Calculation of it is something that is between you and me, which we can discuss over Recon on Recon as an API.
If we already when we ensure as a buyer and seller going together, we make that decision early on in the quote itself. And then the quote is kind of a reflection of the recon and non-recon, on-recon.
Correct. Okay. Correct. But I mean, see, there have been, because essentially the protocol will have to envisage all kind of business scenarios, right? Like today, we are at a stage wherein orders are almost like quadrupling every month. There are possible scenarios wherein a seller application and a buyer application can have working arrangement based on order volume. And this hypothetically speaking, wherein they say that for a certain order volume, your buyer funder fee is X or your seller margin is Y. I mean, all of those nuances is what gets captured here. The disagreements and recon on recon essentially can happen, but there are two very distinct bodies which have distinct roles. Settlement agency is for money movement, and hence the only thing that it basically looks at is how much money should be moved from point A to point B, and whether the two parties have agreed to the amount of money. If the two parties have agreed to the amount, essentially it will move the money. If two parties have not agreed to amount, it will give an error saying that please, Mr. Seller App and Mr. Buyer App, please agree and then come back to me. And then the buyer app and the seller app can engage with each other using Recon or Recon API, and then go back to the settlement agency, say that, listen, we have now reconciled, and please transfer whatever money that has been agreed upon by the two parties.
So it can be reinitiated after reconciling.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
On the same line, I have one more question. So there is one more field, provider field also, right, in the settle call.
Yes.
So like as a buyer app, if I'm collecting the payment, do I also need to worry about that? Like what will be the seller app commission to the provider?
No. For you, it is you need to pay, in the same example, 100 rupees to the seller application. Now, out of that 100 rupees, whether the seller application wants to keep 50 rupees to itself and give 50 rupees to the provider, or it wants to give the entire 100 rupees to the provider, is the seller application's headache. It is not even your headache. Here, the seller, at the time of onboarding and the API itself, the settlement agency reads that 100 rupees, the split of 100 rupees is whatever it is. So for you, it is absolutely no headache. You just need to basically understand whether 100 rupees needs to be given out. Now, the split of 100 rupees is what is sent by the seller application to the settlement agency.
So in one settle call, there could be multiple transaction can be happened by the settlement agency for a particular order, like a transfer to NP and transfer to self also.
Yeah,
and suppose a receiver provide the provider amount also, so that can also be transferred in one same transaction.
Yes.
Okay.
But it can happen in the same transaction, but at an order ID level.
Yes, but settlement agency will only match what is required at my level and what is required at the receiver level. If receiver is providing the provider's account, but I don't know, I am providing that settle call without provider amount.
No, for you, obviously, you will not have that. You will, like I said, like for you in your settle call, you will sell inter NP amount. So you're a buyer application, Praveen.
Yeah.
When you say my inter NP amount is 100.
Okay.
What the seller application will send is inter NP amount is 100. Self amount in this particular case, which it needs to keep is say 50, and then it will give provider details for whatever provider is there. So if you basically, I mean, now because Plotch is going to take it, our developer guide has clear-cut examples of how it needs to be done. From a buyer application perspective, you need not worry about what is the split of 100 which needs to be settled with the seller application and then to the seller.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
I think Rakibul also has one question.
Okay.
Yes.
Please go.
Yeah, so my primary doubt was on the settlement window is that, let's say for some reason after the return period is over, the collector initiated their settle API, but the receiver did not, right, for some reason, or vice versa. Then how the settlement will happen? Let's say on the later date, the receiver triggers a settle API. Will it not be settled?
I think it's a very good question. I think first I will stress upon this particular point. The RSF 2.0 framework has been created with, for a lack of better word, to ensure that the friction in the system with what seller application seller was receiving is sort of getting managed. And a two-way recall essentially happens. So there are two scenarios. One, if the buyer application does not send a settle call.
Yeah.
And say I'm a seller application, you're a buyer application. Between the two of us, some amount of money needs to be settled. Okay. Now I am a seller application. I send a settle call for that particular amount, and you don't send me that settle call. Like for Webhub Goel, you have not sent any settle call for that particular. What the settlement agency will do is it will see that the Webhub Goel as a seller application has sent a settle call against Rakibul as a buyer application for which it has received no settle file. I will, as a settlement agency, I will deduct the money of whatever 100 rupees have been there and pass it on to the seller application. Therefore, it is very, very important for the buyer application, even if there is zero settlement to happen. Like for example, between the two of us, if there is zero settlement to happen, even then send a null settlement file. So every day between Webhub Goel and Rakibul, if there is zero settlement to happen, please send a zero settlement file. In that particular case, if Webhub Goel has asked for 100 rupees and you send a zero settlement file, it will consider it as order mismatch and will not settle anything. The other way around, if you as a buyer application have sent a settle file and me as a seller application have not sent a settle file, your money will not get deducted. It is very, very important that the seller application has sent the has agrees to the amount that you want to pay me. Does it help?
Some of the cases, which could happen, some of the combination of cases where there are the submission from the buyer side, but no submission from the seller app side and vice versa. And what happens? What action does the payment?
The only thing out here is, I think, Yeah, the edge cases are completely clear. I think it's not just edge cases, it is cases.
Yeah, yeah,
That's how things will happen. These are all cases.
yeah.
So it is very, very important that for a buyer application, because see, like I said, the settlement agency is a brainless entity. It does not know what is the settlement window. It does not know what was agreed upon between the two parties. It is looking at the settle call which is coming in from the two parties, which is the buyer application, seller application. Now, if a seller application sends a settle call on a particular day where it was not supposed to hypothetically send a settle call, for which a buyer application has not sent anything, not even send a null file, a blank file, the settlement agency will consider this as a source of truth and will deduct the money.
Yeah.
But if the buyer application does it, wherein it sends that I want to give, as a buyer application, give you money, Neha, and Neha has not demanded anything, it will not settle. It will basically say that it is not something which is up for settlement. So one thing, yeah. So the diagram sort of explains all possible cases quite efficiently.
Okay. So the null settlement is suggested for the buyer applications. Seller applications will only call when the settlement is required.
Yeah, I mean, a seller application will not send a null settlement, is what you are assuming.
Yeah. Understood. Thank you.
Any more questions?
So just one follow-up on the previous point, Weber. So you mentioned that the settlement agency will not consider the parameters like settlement window and settlement basis. So what if the buyer app is not sending null settlements and the seller app has demanded, has sent the settle call, demanding a payment before the settlement window? So
the money will get deducted. If there is balance in the buyer application's account, the money will get deducted. That is the reason why it is imperative that the buyer application sends a null settlement file, even if there is no settlement which is happening. Because you have to appreciate the fact, right? Like the settlement agency will not know what is agreed between the two of you. So for them, there is an instruction which has come in, and the other party has not raised any objection. So why? So it will basically go ahead and make the payment.
Got it.
So either they have to raise null settlement, otherwise it will be settled.
Yes.
Okay. Understood. Weber, we want to take more questions, or we can move forward a bit?
No, I think it's very, very good. I think it's good that we take in questions and then we can quickly walk them through.
Sure.
Through the slide. I think let it be like an open interactive session so that I think people are thinking about it.
Yes.
It sort of covers everything that we have that you have put in the presentation. It's fine if people want to ask more questions.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
If there are none, then we
Weber, there is a...
Yeah.
Hi, Weber. There is a question on the chat with an example. If you can take that, that will be easier for everybody to understand. Here he says that let's say that there is an order with a total amount of rupees 100.
Yeah, okay.
In which item price?
I've read the question.
Okay, I'll just read it out so that others also know when you answer.
Hmm.
So the total price is 100, in which item price is 60, convenience fee is 10, and delivery charge is 20. So if the total comes to 90 rupees only, we'll have to assume 10 rupees.
Let's assume 20 and 20.
So is the buyer if the buyer app deducts 3% on item price, that's like they will deduct on 60 rupees or total 100 rupees?
Okay. Now, firstly, again, I mean, that is completely between the buyer application and the seller application. Right? A certain buyer application can potentially say that my business arrangement with you is that I want to do at a 60 rupees. The certain buyer application might say that I will include everything. So I don't want to. So there's no right or wrong answer in this one. But I can say, for example, what existing buyer applications today are doing.
Yeah.
If I'm a buyer application, I can have a arrangement with my seller application which is saying that my buyer vendor fee is only on item pricing. But say today we say that the buyer vendor fee is on total amount which is collected. So So 100 rupees is what we'll assume for now, that it is getting deducted 100 rupees. So 30 rupees becomes the buyer finder fee. 100 rupees is what is collected, and 70 rupees is what needs to be sent across. So inter-entity amount of the buyer applications becomes 70, and 30 becomes self, and 30 becomes collector. If you are a buyer, if you are a seller application, or the settle call is basically being made by the seller application, inter-entity amount again here becomes 70, collector becomes 30, and self is, again, if you're taking that entire amount of money in your operative current account, becomes 100. Oh, sorry, 70. But whether it is to be levied on 100 or 60 can be what is the arrangement with the buyer application. As of today, the buyer application levy is 3% on the entire total amount of 100.
I think another possible reason could be that, suppose the percentage, the buyer finder fee is levied only on the item price and not on maybe the shipping or the convenience charge. In that case, they might reduce the item price and, increase the shipping cost and the convenience charge. There is a possibility, right? That could also happen.
I mean, see, a lot of times someone asks me this, that, my delivery charge is 20 rupees, which I've passed on from my logistics partner, and now the buyer app has deducted whatever buyer funder fee on my delivery charge. So even though I need to pay 50 rupees as a logistics cost, I am receiving only 47 rupees. My simple answer is that 50 rupees is what you have passed on to the buyer application. You know he's going to charge 3%. So why send 50 rupees? Please send 55 rupees, so that you receive 50 rupees. I mean, that mathematics is something that you will have to do, or work with the buyer application and say that the arrangement between you and us is going to be that you're not going to charge on 50 rupees. If that is the arrangement that he's going to charge whatever buyer funder fee and logistics, also please work the mathematics and increase the particular charge to 55 rupees. Right. So, I mean, all of those things are business decisions which are there between the two parties.
Right.
The protocol and the framework is designed to enable both of these scenarios.
Right. So there's nothing right and wrong. It's between the two parties how they want to conduct this.
Yeah, but I can, like I said, today what happens is it is levied on 100. If the question was that, it is levied on 100, and hence the buyer funder fee in this case becomes 30. Inter-entity amounts become 70.
Right.
Follow-up question on this.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Same thing. I think it's very important to clarify this. So when we send out the buyer finder fees, we send it out to all the sellers, right? It is not like we will send out one buyer finder fee to one seller and something different to another seller. And the second thing is, the payment gateway fees is applied on the entire order and not on the order, the item order. So it is very confusing for the buyer app to actually apply buyer finder fees just on the item and ignore the rest of the things like shipping, delivery, and other things. So payment,
absolutely right.
Yeah, payment has to be deducted out of the total amount for the buyer to pay back to the payment gateway. So those issues are pertinent. Both the cases.
Like I said, like there are genuine reasons why it is being done. There can also be business decisions where someone basically wants to have a different business arrangement with the seller application. They are free to do so, is what I'm saying.
Pepper, one last topic that few people have touched upon is GST. If you want to take that in short.
So I would not be the right person, to be very honest, in terms of who is liable, so there is a dedicated expert. I think Neha, if you would want to have a separate session on GST liability, I'm not the right person, unfortunately. Devendra, who is from my team, he will be the right person for this.
Okay, sure. So are there more questions?
There's a complete tax advisory which is also there on ONDC website, as far as I know. That can also be used.
We can go ahead, Neha. Most of the questions are taken care of. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so advantages you want to take up, Vaibhav?
I think we have already discussed a lot on the same. What you can, in my view, what you can do is, because I have unfortunately like a 6 o'clock commitment that I have to attend to.
Okay.
If you can quickly go through this thing, we can spend like a minute or two on each slide.
Yeah.
And then we can discuss that.
Sure. That should be fine. So basically, there are a couple of important things which are expected.
Okay, sorry, 1 second. I think this is a very, very important question which has come up.
Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful question in my view, just in what you have raised. In fact, I am in the process of creating a detailed FAQ where this gets adequately covered. Right now, the basic question which both the buyer application and seller application can have is: listen, I have an order which is unsettled. We don't agree to something. What is the next step? How will the communication essentially happen between two parties? Because it's an unbundled network. I do not want the receiver cannot call up the buyer application and say that listen, my order mismatch has happened. These are the details. Now, how does this communication happen? So there is a recon and on recon API. In your recon API, the receiver in this particular case, which has received a differential value, for which there's a mismatched or an unsettled order, will send at an order ID level what is the calculation for that particular order ID. So the certain whatever the split, he will send that. In on recon, which is sent by the collector, there's a flag which is called as on record accord, which is mentioned as true or false. If it is true, it means that the collector agrees to the calculation done by the seller application. And if he has agreed, he will give a settlement date, which basically means that I have agreed to it, and he is requesting the other party to send a revised settlement file in the next settlement cycle or whatever settlement date has been given. Please send the settle, and he will basically clear off that particular money. If he does not agree, then they will write a false and they will give their calculation. Now, if the buyer in the seller application in this particular case agrees or agrees to the calculation of the buyer application, they will again have to send a recon with the revised calculation or whatever is the agreed upon. And in that particular case, the buyer application will send an accord as equal to true. Now, and hence the loop of recon on recon essentially gets closed when on record accord is equal to true. Now, at any particular stage of this particular life cycle, both the buyer application and seller application are free to raise an IGM ticket, which has its own workflow. But at a communication with each other, like when they're communicating with each other and doing a reconciliation, recon on recon essentially is the flow that we have created. And with the flow, essentially, like I reiterate, will get complete once recon accord is equal to true. So I hope, Jitin, that answers your question. Yeah. And very shortly, I think in a couple of days, we'll also release out the FAQ, which will have that in place.
Sure. And also, if anybody has more questions, they can also mail it to us even at a later stage if they want to ask anything, any clarifications, any details about any part of it. Please feel free to mail us, message us, and we'll be happy to answer all the questions. And we'll check with Vaibhav also whatever new developments are happening. We will be able to share that with you as well. So very quickly, I just wanted to say there are two things that are important as an NP.
I just want to, sorry, Neha. Vaibhav, if you're leaving, just want to thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure hosting you. Without you, it would have been difficult to answer a lot of questions. So thank you for supporting this, and it's a great pleasure to host you.
Thank you so much, Vaibhav, for that.
I need to thank you guys. I think some of these questions are really, really important. I think one thing that we from ONDC constantly need help, Manoj, from you guys, is actually evangelizing some of these things, right? Like these are some of the like again the way we started is guys, these are some of these things which have never been done in the industry.
Yes,
never even been thought of. Now we have created a framework, but to communicate the importance of that particular framework, that it is actually adding value to may or may not be adding value, right? Getting your feedback so that you can create something which can actually add value to the ecosystem is the most important thing. And I think you guys are taking that initiative to communicate to the audience out there, to that that we are creating something which can potentially change the way payments are today happening is like commendable. So I would really want to appreciate the work that you guys are doing on this one. So thanks a lot for this.
Thank you, Vaibhav. Thank you. Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure if we lose Vaibhav, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so coming back to this, quickly, I'll just tell you there is an account which is known as the Network Participant Bank account. There are certain banks which are onboarded by NBBL, which is NPCI Bill, Bharat Bill Pay Limited. It's a 100% owned subsidiary of NPCI. So basically, they take care of these settlements, and they have onboarded certain banks. It's not all the banks with whom you can create this typical account, which is a non-operative current account, NOCA as we call it. And so there is Yes Bank, there is IDFC Bank, there is ICICI, there is RBL, there is HSBC, and I think a couple of more are about to join in, including HDFC and including SBI as well. So this we as TSP, if you are going with the RSF that we provide, we do the complete handholding of creating of these accounts. All the paperwork and all of that. Certain documents are required from your end. Besides this, you have to also have an agreement with the settlement agency. So that also we help you do quickly, very quickly, and both the things are taken care of. When it comes to the APIs, if you're developing it yourself, of course you have to get all the approvals done and everything by ONDC. If you are going with a technology partner, suppose you're going with Plotch, then all this heavy lifting of tech related work is done by us. Also all you need to do is just take care of what sort of policies you want related to your payouts, etc. Rest everything, your TSP. If it is Plotch, then Plotch takes care of it. Moving forward, if so, it's even if like you are a buyer app or a seller app, who has not yet worked with Plotch, you can take RSF 2.0 as a plug and play. We provide certain APIs with which you can create the payment at your end, and you can send us, and then we send the settle request to you. Because you are taking the RSF only from us, and it's not that the NP node has been provided by us in this case. That's why we need the signature from your end. So that's why we send it to you. You have to sign and then forward it to the settlement agency.
One of the benefits, basically there are a couple of benefits here, right? So settlement agency integration is something that we take care of. So you don't have to worry about the settlement agency integration. That can take like a lot of time. And we have seen that, being, taking a lot of time. And the second thing is there's a certification process of the APIs itself, which ONDC certifies that these of course is compliant with ONDC protocol. So that also we take care of. So there's the two big headaches that goes away for you very quickly. So that's why some of the two benefits I thought I'll highlight.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Manoj, will that also save me time if I am a buyer app or a seller app?
Yeah, it saves a lot of time and a lot of development bandwidth that the NPs end. They just need to use one or two APIs that we give, and then they don't have to worry about certification. The cost and time impact actually is very huge that we have seen with other people who have used us.
Right. So these edge cases were discussed earlier. Very briefly, what is the role of settlement agency? Of course, they take care of all the payouts, and they ensure that it happens in a very non-biased way, and it happens quickly and easily. Yeah, some of the advantages of using Plotch's RSF is something that we have just discussed. It's all automated. Reconciliation happens very easily. We are ONDC certified. It's simple for you to use. So most of the hand holding is done by our team. So it becomes very easy for you, and you don't have to take the headache of doing everything from the scratch. We help you do it very quickly, and your RSF 2.0 will be live. As you know, that for all new NPs, it's already mandatory to go live, and for the existing ones, I think they are going to announce the deadline very soon. So that's why it's important for all of us to understand what is it. So, what are the onboarding requirements? It's something that most of you would already know. PAN, GST. We spoke of that network participant bank account. You require current account details. You also require registration with the NBBL, your board resolution. So some of the things that you have to keep ready for having a quick integration and to go live with RSF 2.0. So that was it. Thank you so much. Are there more questions, Manoj? I'm not able to see the screen. I just
No, I think we had a great session. And anyone who has any question, feel free to Neha shared her email. So feel free to ask. And we want to really thank you for attending this. Hope this was useful to you. We of course do a lot of webinars on different topics. So keep tuned to us. Plotch and if you have any questions and if you want us to cover on a particular topic, feel free to also share that I will happy to bring in relevant stakeholders and into this webinar and try to give you all the information that you need. And with that, I want to thank you Neha for a great presentation. Of course, Vaibhav, we have already said. So with that, I think we look forward to seeing you again. Yeah, thank you. Bye bye.
thank
Take
you
care.
so much. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.